Hello, welcome to A Dog's Breakfast. Today I'm going to show you how to make a rustic apricot galette. I don't know if I'm saying that right, and I found the recipe actually in a Costco magazine that I never ever read, but I did this time, and I found this recipe and it turned out to be pretty good. And it's a rustic apricot galette. A galette apparently is a free-form pie that doesn't use our traditional pie plates, so it's more flat and its shape is irregular, which is great because there's no perfect pie. The recipe calls for apricots. I've yet to have apricots on hand. I had peaches, and the peach was excellent. I have shared this recipe with a couple of friends, so it has been made with blackberries, and that was very successful. Frozen apples, not so successful. I did one with blueberries and it was okay, and I don't know if it was because the blueberries weren't super or if it just isn't as good with blueberries. But the peach was excellent. If I ever have apricots, I'll give it a go, but we'll see. So it calls for pastry, and in this recipe they say to buy one of the refrigerated pie dough, already prepared pie dough, what do you call it, refrigerated pie crust, and you just unroll it, and that's super easy to do, and that's what I've done the last couple of times because it is so easy. But today I'm going to make pastry or pie dough because maybe you'd like to see that it's actually really easy too. And up until a couple of years ago, I just always made my own, but sometimes now I don't. So, basic pastry. This particular recipe comes from an old family cookbook that has fallen apart. So we've used it so much, my sister gave it to us, that we've actually put it into a binder to keep it, because this is one of those rare cookbooks where you actually find a bunch of recipes that you use. So we don't want anything more to happen to this book. So basic pastry, basic pie dough. I'm going to make a single pie crust because that's all I need. So we start with flour, of course. So 1 1/3 cups of all-purpose flour. This is pre-sifted flour. I don't know how important the sifting is. I sift when I think the recipe is good enough and that it's important enough to sift. I'm not convinced it's that important for pie dough. So 1 1/3 cups of flour, and yeah, I have 2 sets of measuring cups, and I just always try to make sure that I use everything from the same set because I don't think these things are totally accurate. So 1 1/3 cups of flour and half a teaspoon of salt. So do that. Yeah, it's a little dangerous to measure over your other ingredients, but it's not that dangerous. Half a teaspoon of salt and half a cup of shortening. So I don't think it matters one bit what kind of shortening. I just always buy these Crisco shortening. I know Crisco comes in a big tub as well, but I've never used that. I sort of feel like this is a little tidier than digging shortening out of a tub, but maybe it's wonderful, I don't know. So half a cup of shortening. And then you can take either a fork, or if you're lucky you've got one of these. These are worth it, pastry cutters, and you just start cutting up the shortening in the flour, making a bunch of cuts with the goal of it being, I think they usually describe this once it's done right, as looking like there's a bunch of peas in here, little tiny bits of flour covered shortening that you've cut up. That's getting close. Yeah, it looks all crumbly in here. I don't think you can tell, but anyway, it does look all crumbly. I forgot a fork. Okay, so once you've gotten it to the consistency you think it should be, clean off your pastry blender, pastry cutter, whatever you want to call it. Okay. And then you add water carefully. You don't need a whole lot of water. The recipe says 3 to 4 tablespoons of cold water, and that is, and I get serious about cold water, so I've got ice water here. And I don't put the ice cubes in it, but it says 3 or 4 tablespoons, so I go with 3 and then start mixing and see. You don't want more water than necessary. You want enough to bring it together, but not too much. So it should start to come together and become a ball of pie dough. And I think 3 is probably going to be enough. So I'm glad I didn't put the 4th in. So bring this together into a ball and then roll it. Exciting part, don't need that anymore. So yeah, don't want to I think the expression is work it. You don't want to work the pie dough too much. You want to mix it together quickly and roll it out without, it's not bread, you don't need to knead it. It's sort of like, I think when you mix muffins, right? You're not supposed to be stirring those forever. Just get them mixed up and stop messing with them. So there we go. That wasn't really, didn't take very long, and probably less time than it takes to, the phone rang, what can I say? Okay, so I think mixing that up probably took less time than it would take to take the pie dough out of the fridge and let it come up to the right temperature. I could be wrong. So you got your pie dough, put some flour on your surface that you're gonna roll it out. I considered rolling it on the parchment paper because that's what it'll bake on. But yeah, I thought that might be difficult, and I realized I can roll up the pie dough and get it on the parchment paper. That's not that big a deal. So a little flour underneath, a little flour on top, rolling pin. And away we go. And I don't know what I do, I just roll it out. Keep moving the pin around so that you've got it going in a nice, hopefully a pretty good circle. I'm gonna flip it over. See, it's not that delicate. Now I know a lot of people that are afraid to make pie dough, and I don't know why. And maybe my pie dough isn't any good, but I don't know that. So I just roll it out and trust it'll be okay. And the nice thing about this galette is if your pie dough starts to come apart at some point, just put it back together. Just squeeze it back together and roll it again. So, and the nice thing about this galette, I realize now, is that you just approximate the size of that pie dough. If you think you've got it to as far as it's going to go, then that's the size of your galette. And you don't have to fit this into a pie plate, so it'll be the size you decide, which is sort of nice. So I'm going to get the parchment paper onto my baking sheet and transfer it. So let's see how that goes. I'm just using a pizza plate, and I don't know if you don't have parchment paper, you probably don't have to use it. You could just put it on your baking sheet, but I have it, so I'm going to use it. Put that on it. I'm not going to cut it to fit the size because I don't care that much about that. Whoops. Okay, that's ripping, but that's okay. Here, let's see if we can roll it back together and then roll the pie dough hopefully up on my rolling pin. Put this here and okay, not too slick but not the worst. So it turns out this is slightly bigger than the pie plate, the pizza pan, but that's okay because I'm going to fold the outer edge up to make a crust. So you squish it back together, whatever did separate, and if you're lucky it didn't separate at all for you. And there we go, we've got our pie dough, pie pastry. We're ready for that part. And again, it's a rustic galette, so it does not have to be perfect, which is really, really nice. Okay, so that's it for the pastry part of it. And I'm just going to clean this up a little bit.